Chip and I are here at our house in Fresno, where we're going to detail ways to inexpensively add curb appeal and improve your landscape for a potential sale. So we're moving and selling this house because we built a new house, which is inspired by Bernard Maybeck Mathewson home. And you can check out what my new house looks like. Click here, and we've done a couple of good videos on it. So one of the things that probably isn't that difficult to think of is to add color. Color is a way to just spruce it up immediately. This whole area used to be a little grape vineyard, and when I knew I was going to try to sell the house, I took out the grape vineyard because I didn't think that was good for curb appeal, although it did have kind of a neat Mediterranean look to it. What I did was I planted it with a ground cover called Carapia, and the Carapia hadn't really taken off, so I got 6 flats of Iceland poppies. They're just starting to bloom. In another week or two, when they're all blooming, I think it'll be pretty stunning entrance to the home. In addition to them blooming, the Carapia is starting to grow a little bit, and I picture in another month we'll have a lot less brown and a combination of Carapia and fully blooming Iceland poppies. So that kind of thinking you can apply to many parts of your home. A really good way to use color, I haven't done here, but maybe I should. So this bougainvillea really looks good most of the year, but when it gets subject to frost, which we've had some 32-degree days, it looks like this. In just a short time, it's going to be full of leaves and blooming. And so I didn't change this, but one place to concentrate your annual planting that really is impactful is in pots. If I was really on top of my game, I'd take these bougainvillea out and plant annuals, and you can plant them real close together and get them to bloom, and that's how you make this entrance look fantastic. The other thing we could do is we have these dwarf citrus in pots, which do very well. There's still one left from this season here on this one. For curb appeal, that would be another thing, is to plant annuals under these dwarf citrus, and that would be very attractive and something I would recommend for curb appeal. I skipped that so far, and we'll see if it hinders my ability to sell this house. We put a little effort into using some kind of bark mulch. In this case, it has a nice dark color to improve the look of the soil. This is called Supreme Walk-On bark, and we used it in both sides of this walkway. We did that in all the planting areas. We just put a thin layer. The other thing we did, you can see we have these walking paths made out of 3/8-inch gravel. This is called California Gold, and it has edging. We just spruced that up a little with a little bit of gravel on top, because over the years it starts looking a little bit dingy. We wanted it to have, a little brighter color. And then we cleaned up where the edge was so that you can see the edge. You can see a distinct difference between where the planting area is and where the gravel area is. All of those things are inexpensive because it doesn't take much of either. You can buy a yard of mulch for probably $50 or so, and you can buy a ton of 3/8-inch California Gold for about the same, maybe a little more, $75. And so you can clean up all the surfaces of your garden. Even though these materials are readily available and you could do it yourself, you can also hire somebody for very inexpensive amounts to do these kinds of improvements. Since we have a lot of things growing and sprouting here, we didn't want to use any chemical, so we've just been hand pulling the weeds. But that's possible because we don't have a garden with a lot of weeds because it's been maintained. But we put a little extra effort into making sure that we don't have weeds. There's certain themes to your garden or your landscape. One of the themes here is this row of mandarin oranges called Pixie, that's the variety, is supposed to be all one height. So one of the first things we did when we're trying to maximize curb appeal is kind of a cleanup pruning, where we get them to look natural, but we get them to look all the same height. So we didn't use hedge trimmers. We just came in with hand trimmers and pruned them all. If you have a lot of trees around your house, trees growing on the roof or looking overgrown or having a lot of dead growth on it, we had some dead growth on these poplar trees, so we pruned. Now this is something that, because of the size of these trees at this house, you can't do yourself unless you happen to be a good at climbing trees. So you hire somebody to prune any dead branches out, lift them up so they're not on the roof. In our case, we hired somebody to spray the roof off, clean it, with a pressure spray. The deodar cedar and the Canary Island pine, they're over 100 feet tall. They're about 120 feet tall. So we had somebody thin them, prune them, lift them up, not to do a whole lot of pruning, but to make it look like everything's under control. Nothing's overgrown, nothing's dead and dying. That's the kind of pruning that you might be confronted with. I've got some herbs here, and so we pruned off all the old seed heads. This is oregano, that's another variety of oregano. And then I've got mint in these two areas, and it's just starting to come back. It was impacted by winter low temperatures. The mint is going to fill these areas in. So for the sale, all I did was try to keep the winter weeds out. So if you have an herb garden, you can clean them up, and so it'll start to look like an herb garden again as soon as we get warmer weather. Okay, you want to go in the back? We followed a lot of the same principles. We pruned everything that needed pruning. We cleaned up the ground plane with 3/8 inch gravel, got rid of all the weeds. One of the rules of curb appeal is get that lawn as green as you can get it. So that's what I'm doing by using the overseed, because when it first comes up, it's really beautiful, and fertilization. When we first put the house on the market, the lawn was dormant and mostly brown. I should have overseeded it with perennial rye earlier, but I waited a little too long, and I did it just about 4 weeks ago. And it's just starting to germinate now. And then I used Nourish Biosol on it, and so it's starting to develop a nice color. I prefer to use Nourish Biosol when I fertilize because it's really good for the soil, and it does more than just fertilize the lawn. However, if you're thinking only about selling your house and you want that lawn to turn as green as possible as soon as possible, then you can get a synthetic fertilizer that would work faster than Nourish Biosol. It would not improve the soil. Then you would use a winter type, cool season releasing synthetic fertilizer high in nitrogen. If you have any water features, make sure they're working appropriately. Clean all the surfaces as much as you can. That's a nice drinking fountain for Chip also. This paving material is kind of expensive, probably not a do-it-yourself job, although you could do it if you're good at this type of work. The concept is very doable in a lot of different ways. You want to look at what your paving material is and either fix everything that doesn't look right by cutting it out and patching it, or figuring out some way to do an overlay. This was essentially an overlay. The paving was very old and had root damage and just failure from it being old. So starting about 6 to 8 months from when I knew we might be ready to sell it, I started really not replacing, just overlaying the paving. And we used a real thin porcelain tile outdoor paver. And by using a real thin one, we didn't have to do a lot of grading. We were able to keep the coping around the pool. As you follow along, you can see this paver we used all the way around the yard and down the side yard, where we have another water feature and some nice tropical plantings. You can use any strategy to clean up your circulation, make it safe, level, and attractive. You could use a sealer over the paving, which gives it a kind of a nice luster. I don't like to use a real shiny sealer, and I had already sealed all of this paving and the brick, and so we just pressure washed everything. But you could pressure wash it and go over it with a sealer again, so that is another option to make your walking surfaces as attractive as possible. You might have some parts of your garden that get growths of moss, and that's particularly a problem on paving. We do get some moss on this brick patio. If you spray it with chlorine or even Clorox, you can get rid of it and get rid of it quickly. And while you're selling the house, it's good to try to prevent that from coming back. If you want to buy the house that Chip grew up in, this is Chip's house. So if you want to live in Chip's house, think about buying it here at 541 East Terrace Avenue, Fresno. And we lived here 35 years. Really nice neighborhood and an excellent house, built in 1922 and built in a way that's meant to last. If you'd like to call our realtor JT or see the Zillow listing, it's in the description below. We hope you liked the video. It's the first time we've ever tried to sell a house on our YouTube channel. We probably won't be doing this ever again, I hope. If you liked it, let us know that you liked it and tell all your friends to subscribe and watch our videos, and we'll continue to make them. If you have an idea of what would be an important video for us to do, let us know. I like that idea, but we didn't.
What was the idea?
To paint fresh numbers on the curb. And if you look at ours, they're terrible. I like that idea. I recommend that, but I didn't do it.